Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in. I'm Robbie.
I'm Jason.
And welcome to the table. There's a slight pause there. I panicked. I was worried. Big episode for you guys today. We are excited. Episode number 30.
Dang.
Jason, that means we've been doing this for over a year.
Yep. Over a year. It's crazy. Think about that.
Man.
Because it doesn't feel like a year, but then I was like, wow, it has been a year. September of last year is when we started. So that's pretty crazy and awesome. I'm enjoying it. How about you?
Hey, loving it. And I love that I'm a routines guy. I'm all about my routines. I'm all about the patterns and things like that. So I enjoy that we have this rhythm, and it really, I think from a listener standpoint, like bring people in on the analytics on the other side. Some of our best episodes are lists. I think we've talked about this before, like in the board gaming community, lists. People just love lists because there's so many. Maybe it's because there's so many games out there. It's like, this is the fastest way for me to find like more things that I might like. And today's list is a good one. So kind of very excited, especially for the take that we're going to have on it. But it's not just these games that we're going to be talking about. We've played some games lately. And because we have a top 10, we're only picking one. So, Jason, I'm excited to hear, which game are you planning on? What are you going to share? What have you been playing lately?
I played a couple. I actually played a game with you, and I played a game with Brad. I won't talk about those here because they may or may not show up on my list. We'll find out in a minute. But another game that I played like a week and a half ago is a game called Queen by Midnight. Had never heard of this game, but my daughter put in our little family text group, hey, we got a new game. Does anybody want to play it? Well, of course, if my kids want to play a game, I'm going to absolutely say yes, no matter what the game is. Queen by Midnight, the summation of it is it's a deck building game in which the queen has stepped down and you're a princess trying to become the queen by midnight by doing different things. Deck building game, which on your turn, traditional deck building, you're using basically resources to play cards to take actions. The actions are buy other cards or trying to eliminate other players. It's a lot more than that, but that's the basics of it. The one interesting thing in here, I'll step back and say the production of it is amazing. The art's amazing. It has this very cool clock tower that basically counts down the rounds. It didn't have to be a clock tower, but it's really cool. That also acts as a dice tower. You don't roll dice too often in the game, but when you do, you have a dice tower there. But at a certain point in the game, you choose secretly that, if I'm eliminated, because there's an elimination game, I'm going to support this other princess at this point. So you could actually choose someone who eliminates you later on. That's what happened in our game. But you choose it at some point, and then if you ever get eliminated, you have to reveal, and now you are helping that person on they're taking traditional turns, but on your turn, you can take one of two actions. All the princesses have asymmetric powers. I think there's 7 or 8 in the game. And so traditional deck builder, the 4-player game was, I think, 7 rounds. In the end, Elizabeth just ran through us all because it did have some of the asymmetric powers could be a little OP, overpowered, but it was still a fun game. I have a lot of deck builders, so I would never own this game, and it's from the Critical Role universe. For those who watch Critical Role, D&D people love Critical Role. My kids are massive Critical Role fans. They have a couple of the games from the Critical Role publishing house, Darrington Press. So it was fun to play, and I'm glad I got to play it. And I mean, you and I play enough games, I can pick apart stuff from a lot of games, but it's not complicated. Fun deck building game in which as you go, you just have more ability to play more cards. Whereas in traditional deck building games, you have almost the same ability unless you happen to pull a card that gives you more ability. Or in this one, as you go, your turns get longer because you're building up basically different additional power instead of resources, power to play those cards. So each subsequent round, you could possibly play more cards, which is just really fun. You have your own deck, you have a private deck, and then you have a common deck you can choose from or common market. Not too bad of a game. It's not one Alex that I'll ever buy, but if Hannah will want to play it, I'd happily play it again.
Dude, I haven't played any by the Critical Role folks, but as like a longtime D&Der, I wonder if it's like that love of them makes the game shine a little brighter for some, since you don't have that fandom, and maybe like Hannah will do. And I how many times does that happen, right? Like an IP or something, really, like even the people that are behind the game just makes you appreciate it even a little more. Like maybe that's why even Sorcerer City, like having to gotten to meet and chat with Druid City itself, like that feels so good for making the game shine.
That's Red Rising. Red Rising's just fine game. Not the most amazing thing, but because I get to see these characters, I am so wildly more invested. Mistborn, whatever Mistborn games come out is going to be the same thing. Even if the game's not great, the fact that I'll get to see Vin and Kelsier and all these other characters, like, it's going to be so exciting. So it's kind of similar. And while the Queen of the Damned isn't characters from it, it's that affinity from it, the connection to Critical Role, and they've seen the Critical Role actors play the game. So, it's a good analogy.
Yeah. So what I got to play this week was a game. Like Jason said, got to play a game together. I think that we both anticipated playing more games, and then we were not prepared for the social activities that happened while we were together, as well as just raw exhaustion. Jason and I got back to the hotel each night. We were like, all right, 7:15. 7:15. Okay, see you in the morning. So it was a great trip, very, very fun. But spoiler alert, the game that we did play is on my list. It definitely jumped on there. But the game that I played, went out with friends to a local brewery, had an anniversary, and so they were like, hey, let's go. Let's bring a bunch of games. And so we brought several games, but one that we ended up playing is one of those memorable games that I like. It'll just stay with me for a long time, and that is King of Tokyo. We covered King of Tokyo on the show, and it was everyone's first time playing except for myself. We played with a full table of 6. And for those who I know we mentioned it in the episode, but it drastically changes things when you go above a 4-player count in King of Tokyo, because now there are 2 spots available inside of the city, which changes the decision making dramatically for everyone else. And so the crew that we played with, I kind of put out this challenge of, and I said it when I was explaining, I was like, yeah, so you win by either having 20 victory points or being the last monster standing. I will tell you guys, very often it comes down to last monster standing, but victory points are very much like a possibility. And every single person at the table took that as a personal vendetta to say, I'm going to win on victory points, which opened the door for me to come in and cause chaos. The power-up cards are something that make what really this game highlighted for me that we ended up playing was it highlights how much the power-up cards influence how the game actually plays out. So the 2 power-up cards that ended up meaning the most, where there was one where when you buy it, all of your punches hit everyone, whether you're in Tokyo or not. And I was like, I'm going straight for that. Game on. Here we go. Everyone's dead. And then another card that ended up, a couple more power-ups got bought. And then one of the girls was, she was just staying in the city, trying to ride out like, I'm getting those 2 points at the start of my turn. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. And a card flipped over that was basically like, if you go to 0, you can trade in this card and basically start back over at 10 life, but you also lose all your victory points. And that ended up being what won the game for her. It's because I killed her. She got reset to 10, and then everyone else started punching her again. And then she lived by actually 1 heart to end up defeating me. And so it was crazy. It was a turn where it was like rolled the dice, took out 3 people, and we went from a 6-player game to a 3-player game, and then come back around and then kill another person. And then it was a blast. So King of Tokyo also just reminds me how wonderfully simple that game is to teach. People were looking a little confused when I'm explaining all of it. And then I was like, but you just got to remember, guys, it's Battle Yahtzee.
Yeah.
Pick them up, re-roll, you're good to go. So super, super fun. But we do have a lot of fun games for you today in this list. We have the top 10 today is we are talking about 2-player games, because I know for lots of folks out there, Jason, you're living in an empty nest world. I and my wife and I, we have a child on the way. I don't think Leo's going to be playing board games with us anytime soon. But maybe we'll have him pick some pieces. I look forward to that day where it's like holding like colorful objects in front of my son and be like, which one should I go with? And he's like, that one. Like, yeah, it's going to be a fun time. So we are doing top 10 2-player games. But when we talked about this, I think that it's important to note that inside the board game world, as you guys are listeners going into the board game world, there are lots of games that are 2-player specific. Like the player count stops. And that is something that a lot of folks are going to hold against certain games or really love about certain games is the player count limitations. Jason's mentioned before is a family of 5. It's tough because a lot of games cap out at 4. So when we approached this, I kind of told Jason that I was not going to be doing a lot of 2-player specific games because there are other games that exist that I really love that I think play best at 2 players. So really excited to go into this. I will say that my list, I did land, Jason, perfectly half and half. So okay. I have 5 that are like 2-player specific and then 5 that are multiplayer, bigger player counts, but I prefer it too. So Jason, how do you feel about the setup? Anything else you want to add before we dive in?
Yep. I agree with what, obviously I agree with it because we talked about beforehand, but it is having watched many top 10, top 100 lists from content creators across the board, it's always an interesting discussion, right? Because there are some lists out there that top 10 multiplayer games that play best at 2. Because there's so many games in this pantheon, right? There's so many out there and there's some that's top 2-player only games. And so for us, because we haven't played as many as all those, and especially Robbie hasn't yet, it was easy to say there's plenty of games out there that are best that you like it too. So for me, I actually just changed my list right before we started because I'd put 2 games on there that are great at 2. One of them Robbie and I talked about, and we'll have some honorable mentions at the end. Last week, Robbie and I talked about it, but it's not my favorite version because there's no specific favorite version of it. That makes sense, right? But I have one. I end up having, I think 9 of mine are 2-player games purely, and 1 is a more than 2-player game, but that I think everyone agreed plays best at 2. So, but it easily covers those things for sure based on what we've played. And I just have so many games. I repeat that statement way too much, but I've played so many games. I own so many games that it's hard to do. And it was hard to come down with this. Like I wrote a list out right after you and I decided on 2 players, and then I changed it again. Then I changed it again. Then I wrote a list yesterday, and then I changed it this afternoon. And then, like I said, I literally just changed it right before we started. I was updating it right before we jumped on here because this is a hard list for me to do this is absolutely my number 1. This is absolutely my number 2. Is it my number 1 because of gameplay? Is it my number 1 because of, the emotional connection to it? Because all these 2-player games I primarily have played with Elizabeth. I've played them almost all of them with my kids at least once or twice. But Elizabeth's the primary person I play with almost all these games. So is it because we just have this history of those games? And by the way, all the above is correct. Your list is your list, and you go through it as you see fit. So with that said, I'm going to jump right in if you're ready for that, Robbie.
Dude, let's fire away. Let's get into this list.
Cool. My first one is it's an interesting one because this version of this game, this is a dual version of a game that's multiplayer. The dual version, i.e. only 2-player version, is more highly rated than the main game. My number 10 is 7 Wonders Duel. 7 Wonders Duel, basically, so we covered 7 Wonders, right? I think we 30 episodes in, I think we covered 7 Wonders, or maybe we did. Maybe we covered Sushi Go Party instead of 7 Wonders. We talked about 7 Wonders.
We may not have done 7 Wonders.
You're right. Because I think we did Sushi Go Party instead. But in 7 Wonders, it's a 3 to 7 player game that's purely card drafting. You start with 7 cards in your hand, you play a card, you pass, you play a card, you pass, and then the way you play those cards give you resources or points or fighting ability. 3 rounds, you play 18 total cards. 7 Wonders is one of the all-time greatest games there's ever been. And I still love 7 Wonders, right? But it never had a good 2-player version of the game. In the original game, there was a variation you could play that just wasn't good because card drafting among 2 players it doesn't have the same dynamics of it. Whereas 7 Wonders Duel, you're drafting, but instead of passing cards back, you actually lay cards out on the table in this very unique way. You lay, maybe we'll say 7 cards face down, and then you lay 5 cards face up, but they're covering the corners of the cards above them. And then it's like 4 cards face down. So as you're drafting, you're literally drafting the cards that are on the table. So you can take face up cards if there's no other cards laying over the corner. You can take any card that isn't covered up, but it could be face up or face down. So sometimes you could be drafting a face down one, or you could be drafting a face up one. It is amazing. We don't play it enough. Honestly, a lot of these games I've played a ton, but some of these we don't play enough. But 7 Wonders Duel, if you like 7 Wonders, and want a 2-player version where it's a lot of the same. You're drafting a card that's going to give you a resource, or you're drafting a card that's the blue cards, the wonders that just give you points, or you're drafting the soldiers, which gives you more soldier strength. And in Seven Wonders Duel, there's actually 3 ways to win. You could just make it to the end, 2 or 3 rounds, and have the most points. Or if you get the most amount of soldier strength, if there's a little tracker that if you pull a soldier all the way over to your side, you just automatically win. And there's a third way you automatically win as well. So Seven Wonders Duel, small little profile game. I didn't grab it. I realized I grabbed the boxes for the games, but I didn't grab that one just to show it off. Seven Wonders Duel. If you like Seven Wonders, if you like drafting but haven't found a 2-player game, it's such a unique draft way. And it's such a unique way to draft the cards that they're already laid out. In each round, they're kind of rearranged in a different way, but you're still drafting the same way.
Dude, phenomenal answer. I have yet to play Seven Wonders Duel, but I think that it is Seven Wonders itself. I'm like, yeah, we have not done it. The only really like pass and draft that we've done is Sushi Go Party, which was episode 3. So
yep. I will say this too. Seven Wonders Duel is my highest BGG rated game for what it's worth, because it's rated 19. That's how highly rated this game is on BGG. For those who, and BGG can take with a grain of salt sometimes, but it has a fair amount of accuracy, at least in the top 100. And it's literally it's the 19th overall game on BGG. So that says a lot about Seven Wonders Duel.
Dude, absolutely. Well, my number 10, I'm going to get it out of the way because it's on the list. If I'm being realistic, it's probably higher. My list, very similar to Jason, is like very fluid. Certain games, like as I built this list, I got to the 10 that were on the list pretty quickly. Sorting them has been a trial and a half. I had a 6-hour car ride that I actually was just like, no, I think that one jumps that one. But I knew my number 10 stayed number 10 because, like I said, I feel like it's a cop-out. So I'm going to put it in here because I have to say it from just sheer number of plays. My number 10 is Lorcana / like trading card games.
Yeah.
So I think for me, this list is one that if you are like, you have a significant other, you have a friend, like a roommate even, that like, hey, it's just 2 of us, we're trying to get into games. I think this is a list that people will go to pretty fast for like, oh, I want to get this, I want to get this, I want to get this. If you don't have any kids, whatever it may be. And it's hard to argue that the replayability and the fun side of things can beat any of the TCGs. Lorcana is up there for me personally right now, but I think it could be substituted for any trading card game that's out there. In fact, we were just at a disc golf event, and one of the disc golfers, his name is Eric Oakley. Eric is a big Pokemon player, or he was last off season. And so we were just chatting about like, hey, we're going to do a collaboration piece in the off season on my disc golf channel. And then I was like, oh, are you getting back to like the Pokemon live streams? And he was like, nah, dude, Star Wars. I'm a SWU guy now, Star Wars Unlimited. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. He's like, are you in one right now? I was like, yeah, I'm in Lorcana. So I think you can really swap them out for anything. Trading card games, obviously, usually designed for a 1-to-1 player, like a head-to-head type style. Yep. But yeah, it's definitely up there for me. And like I said, I think realistically, like in terms of plays and things, I would put it lower, but it does feel like cheating to have it in the list super low. So I didn't want to get frowned at by my co-host. So it comes in at number 10 because I have to have it on the list. Yeah. But I will get frowned at for this probably because I was unaware how loved this game is amongst the board game community. It's in my top 10 for sure, but it's my number 9, and it is Lost Cities. So Lost Cities is a 2-player, I'm not going to call it a drafting game because it's not would you call it a drafting game? I
would say the best way I could say that it's the hand management, because you're not purely drafting.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not a pure draft. Whereas sometimes you, depending on how you take the cards, you're either taking one face up or face down, essentially. But it's not really a draft in that you're taking from a hand and passing back and forth.
Yeah. So In Lost Cities, you are playing head to head, and there are a number of colors in front of you. And as you're playing this game, you're playing cards in numerical order, but you're drawing them from a deck. So you have to know, like, I'm kind of looking at what I have in front of me, and I'm planning ahead to what cards I'm going to be playing. The thing about it is that I think it's like a super fascinating mechanic is when you go into a color, there's all these colors represented, and you play until the deck is basically done. And so when you're playing these cards out in front of you, you could just ignore one color entirely. Like, basically give your opponent all of those options. Because when you choose to go in on playing cards onto a color to start accruing points, you actually start in the negative. And where that gets like really fascinating is towards the end of the game when your hand gets really limited and you're like, oh, I'm going to have to go in on blue. I don't really want to go in on blue, but like I kind of got to. And you can even somewhat force your opponent into those sort of decisions. But since you're placing them in numerical order, you can't go backwards. So your paths are very limited. So you can go super wide, you can go super deep in one color. There's a lot of variance to it. And it was a game that we went to, I believe it was Target when Lindsay and I first, like, we were early on in marriage. And we decided for a game night, or a date night, let's go to Target, let's buy a board game, let's go. And Lost Cities was one that we played so many times. Very, very fun. It's one that, like, we sit down and we play it and we have a blast. But in a world of there's a lot of other games, it usually gets forgotten and we end up with one of the other 8 that are on the list here, jumping in front of it. But I do think that, like, that's where I realized when I was looking at it, I thought Lost Cities was this, like, I know Jason and Elizabeth have played it. I thought maybe because they've just played a lot of games, they know about it. Did not know that amongst 2-player games that it is, like, it's up there according to board gamers. Lost Cities.
Yep, for sure. Because it's an older game. I had to go look it up. I mean, it's 1999, so that's, 25 years ago that game was released. And so many gamers who first got into it, especially then, maybe not now, people may not jump into Lost Cities as a new gamer. They may go to Seven Wonders Duel or something else that we're going to talk about on our list. But Lost Cities being one of those OG games that 2-player games went into. We've played it for a long time. It was a game that we'd play. There was a place in Germany called Sensopolis, especially an indoor playground. We'd go play it while the kids would go run around because it was safe enough. We could just let them go crazy in there when we were living in Germany. So we've played a lot of Lost Cities. I don't know how we found that. So many other games we found through, as we talked about many times, tabletop. I don't know how we found Lost Cities, but we got it in Germany and played it a good bit then for sure. Yeah, it's 331 overall, but it's for BGG rank. But it is one of those that in the pantheon of gaming reviewers, especially older ones, Lost Cities was one they got into and played a ton as well. Good choice. All right, so my number, my number 9. I can say this about almost every game. It could flip-flop anywhere in this top 10, so it'll be the last time I say it, hopefully. My number 9 is actually based on a political scandal that happened. And so when you hear the name of the game, you're like, how is there a game called Watergate? So in Watergate, you're either playing the Nixon administration or essentially the press, if I remember correctly. And Watergate is a hand management game where you each, depending on which one you're playing, you have a full deck, you shuffle, and you're drawing a certain number of cards. And on the board, you're trying to move. It's all thematic. I can't remember all the themes of it, but you're trying to move. You're playing cards to move pieces down, colored evidence that's either light blue or yellow or green down your track, or they can pull it across to their track. And at the end of once you've played through that round, if that evidence is on your side, you can now put it on the board. And if you're the press, you're trying to connect those pieces from Nixon in the middle to 2 other people to basically get them guilty. But if you're Nixon administration, you're trying to get that evidence, but you can play it face down. So you can't see a connection, like they hide the evidence or whatever. The thematics is pretty wild and pretty crazy for sure. I'm not a big historian, so I recognize some of the names, of course. But what's fun about Watergate is hand management. You're playing cards to do stuff. One of my favorite things to say, one of my favorite things to do. But essentially that's what you're doing in Watergate, playing a card to move this piece over here. Or you can play, it has some cards that are one use in the entire game. You either can move a piece or use the text on it and do this big move. Elizabeth has beat me multiple times because she has the perfect card land at the right time and just blows me up. Not really, but she gets a lot of stuff done on the board. I've maybe won that game once out of 6 or 7 plays because I just clearly am not very good at it, and her cards come up perfectly and not for me. But Watergate, a game that the reviewers talked about it. They said it was great. I was like, I don't know anything, but it's hand management. You're playing cards to do stuff. And so I tried it and we love it. It's one that we've played a ton and is definitely becoming in the rotation for Fantastic February because we play 2-player games, obviously, for Fantastic February. That's my number 9.
Straight into your number 8, brother.
My number 8,
boop our way down, shall we?
For sure. My number 8 is the game that Robbie and I played together.
Okay.
2 days. Today's Tuesday. It was Sunday night that we played this. We played another version, a dual version of a game that the original game we did cover on the podcast. And as soon as the dual version came out 2 years ago, so many people who played the main version for a while said, "Oh, this is." They would say a better version, but it's definitely the better 2-player version of the game, in my opinion, and that's called Splendor Duel. What's funny is the one other time I talked about Splendor Duel on the podcast is when we interviewed Jamie, of all things, Jamie Stegmeyer. So that's just a funny thing. I remember talking about Splendor Duel then. But in Splendor Duel, if you remember us talking about Splendor, essentially you are getting tokens, jewel tokens, to buy cards. Those cards now give you more permanent resources. You trade the physical tokens in to get a card. And then now if you get that card, if you have a gem or a ruby, now you have a permanent resource and you continue to buy more and more cards. The cool thing about Splendor Duel is that there's 3 different winning conditions. In main Splendor, the winning condition was the first person to hit 15, you finish the round, and whoever has the most points wins. That's the only winning condition in main Splendor. In Splendor Duel, it's the first person to 20 points, the first person to 10 points in their own color, if they all in one color, and all in one gem. And I'm totally blanking on the other one. Oh my gosh, I can't remember. Oh my gosh, what was the?
You're talking like
the 3 winning conditions. Yeah.
Same in one color, same like 10 in one color, 20 overall, or. Well,
now I'm frustrated. I can't remember it.
Yeah.
Because so full disclosure, Robbie got me by getting. I think you ended up getting 20 points. He won 20 to 19. Yeah. Oh, it's having 10 crowns. So there's also cards. I had to pull up my Splendor Duel. Here's the winning condition card for those watching on YouTube. So the cards also have little crowns on there that if you get cards with 10 crowns, you automatically win. The one other fun thing about Splendor Duel is that some of the cards, when you buy them, play them, you now have additional bonus abilities, which is, getting to do bonus things is always fun. One of it could be, hey, take another turn. One of it could be, hey, steal a token from an opponent. One could be take a token of that color of the card you just played off the board. The last thing I'll highlight very quickly is the drafting for Splendor. The taking of the tokens is different because in regular Splendor, you can just take whatever colors, one of each or 2 of a specific one. But in Splendor Duel, they're on a board and they're randomly placed out, and you have to always take in a row. And so it becomes this unique dynamic of, am I going to take these 3 or these 2 here? What colors am I going to take? And at some point, someone has to refill the board and the other person gets this little piece that gives them a bonus later in the game. Really high level of that, but Splendor Duel is everything that's great about Splendor condensed down and pumped up for a 2-player version.
Oh, I have thoughts, but I'll share them because, spoiler alert, you're going to hear about Splendor Duel a little later on down the list. But I did think about this when we were prepping, is like Fantastic February. Yeah, y'all end up with a lot of 2-player games. So I was like, man, how did Jason land on 9? And it was like, oh, yeah, they've been doing this for years of having a few options in front of them. Sure. So my number 8 comes in at my first game that is a multiplayer game that personally I've played it the most at 2 players, so it probably shines for me the most there, and that is Sagrada. Now Sagrada plays well at multiple people. I like it at multiple people, but I very much enjoy in Sagrada, there can be this feeling of interruption that occurs when you're laying out the pieces for multiple people, like the die, and you're trying to figure out which die you want to get. With less players, that interruption happens obviously a lot less. Or at least it feels like it happens a lot less. It also allows you to, if you want to pay attention to what die the other people may need, you can focus in a little more on that. That's not really like an important part of Sagrada, but Sagrada is a drafting game where you're drafting die onto your board, trying to complete essentially a puzzle that you're creating for yourself. And the more you can optimize that puzzle, the more points you can get along the way. Really enjoy Sagrada. A lot of my plays are coming from games and really positive memories of Lindsay and I just kind of like sitting in the living room playing a game. And Sagrada was one that, like, when we first played it, we went back and played it multiple times throughout the rest of that evening. The first time we played Sagrada, we had checked it out from the library. And I mean, we had to have cleared 10 plays on just the week that we had it from the library. So I really enjoy Sagrada. I think that several of my games that I have, we've covered on our list, not from a like, oh man, I just haven't really played any games, but like it's games that I very much enjoy playing and I think play very comfortably at 2. Sagrada, what I really like is Lindsay and I played it so much that we know the game very well at 2. We have fun at 2. And it kind of creates this fun dynamic of like, okay, do you want to like collectively, the two of us, do you want to go for like a big one? Like, let's go like a really complicated initial layout. And we can make that agreement together. Whereas I feel like when you play it at higher player counts, like if I'm playing it at 4, it would be really tough unless everyone was like, hey, let's play again. I don't know that everyone's like, yeah, I would like to do that. Like minimum I can accept is like a 7 difficulty. Okay, cool. So yeah, very much enjoy that. My number 7 comes in at another game that plays multi-people. And this one, I went back and forth. I'll say the other one that I considered, but it's definitely not a modern hobby game. But I wanted to go with something polyomino related because I love polyomino games. Actually have 2 that tried to fight for this slot, but the one I landed on was New York Zoo. And the reason I like New York Zoo is because in New York Zoo, you are gathering polyomino pieces and putting them in your habitat or in your zoo to create habitats for animals to exist in. And so as you're gathering these pieces, I love the polyomino element, but also in 2-player games, if they're not like real-time 2-player games, because there's no one else there, it's really hard to converse with the person you're playing with because they're taking their turn. So it's like the experience of the game, the social experience of the game can kind of get low because, okay, they're taking their turn, so they have to focus up during this.
Yeah,
I'm taking my turn. I have to focus up during this. In New York Zoo, you kind of have the ability to have things happen on everyone's turn because the little animal is walking around the zoo and breeding happens. So even on my turn, I'm still doing stuff, even if I don't get to talk to Lindsay or talk to whoever I'm playing with at the same time. It also, the race is very obvious. Okay, once the board's full, the board's full. Talking about it feels bad when other people take your stuff. When you complete a breeding in a habitat, you get to draft like a new piece to go onto your board. If you have a full player count playing it, those pieces get eaten up really, really fast. Whereas at 2 players, you get really the joy of like kind of getting the pieces you want. It makes for a more fun experience, at least in my opinion. But I really think that like that dynamic when I was picking these is like, yeah, I always forget as the social guy how much in 2-player games you kind of don't get that social interaction because like I can't ask Lindsay how her day is going or else it just delays the game dramatically because, well, now she's not focused on doing her turn. So,
right.
Yeah, number 7 for me, New York Zoo.
Great choice. I've only played that twice at 2. Liz and I split the games, but I could see I can see that being a great game for 2 for sure. My number 7 game is another historical-based game. It's called, the name of the game is Blitzkrieg, World War II in 20 minutes. It's the game I actually played with Brad the first night we were there before you got down, you got stuck in all that crazy traffic. So Blitzkrieg is it's a bag pulling game in that there's a board. Thematically, you're either playing the Axis or Allies. And there's a board with multiple theaters that basically is a cube. You're trying to move on one side of the board or the other side of the board. You're pulling out pieces that you can play in those underneath those tracks, and you're trying to essentially move the piece over to one side, your side, or your opponent's trying to move it to their side. That's essentially the gist of the game. It's a push-pull game. You're pulling pieces from a bag, and you always have 3 behind your shield. You have a little privacy screen, so you can always play one of those, then you pull another one. But then you can do things. You can play a piece that knocks out one of your opponent's pieces. You can play a piece that lets you move more on that track. You can play a piece that lets you move more on other tracks. Elizabeth and I played that one a ton. There's definitely strategy, but then you still have the luck of what pieces come out for sure. Because I thought I was running away with it for Brad, and then he knocked me down to only being able to have one piece every single time instead of a choice of 3. But I had the perfect pieces come out to help me win, because we ended up playing it twice, and I won both times Brad and I played. Because the one thing that helped is in the theaters, if you close the theater while there's still bonus spaces open, you get all these bonus actions as well. If you like some level of history, Watergate's much more like the cards are like Gordon Libby and hardcore, like people from history. If you like really historical games, Watergate's there. This one isn't as much on the history side, some high level stuff, but it's a bag pulling game, push your luck games. And it really does play in 20 minutes. Like, it takes almost longer to set it up because you got to put all the pieces back in your bag and put the cubes out and that than it does to play the game. And it goes pretty quick and pretty fun for sure. Blitzkrieg, World War II in 20 minutes, my number 7. My number 6 game is sort of an abstract game, sort of, kind of, maybe. It is a I split you choose game called Hanamikoji. Hanamikoji is a purely 2-player game. Another one that every game I've covered so far is all purely 2-player games. Hanamikoji is, you're basically trying to win the favor of geishas, and you're playing out geishas from your hand to try to win the favor. And you have cards numbered 1 through 5, or 2 through 5, and there's 2 of one geisha, 2 of another, 3 of one, 3 of another, and there's 4 different actions you can take, 4 different kinds of things you can do. And you start, it's basically hand management, and you start with all these cards in your hand. You're like, okay, I split you choose. I'm going to turn 2 pairs of 2 cards. You choose 2 and I keep 2, and you play those cards on your side of the board. And whoever has more for that side of the board at the end of that round wins the favor of that geisha. Your goal is to win the favor, I think, of 4 geishas after each round. So the push-pull nature of it you can have a longer game because you could just have the cards come out and go back and forth for sure. Because there is no stalemate thing. If you keep going to stalemate, you just keep playing till somebody's able to win it. I'm not doing a good job explaining it, but it's a little bit of I cut, you choose. We're playing cards to each side of this row of cards in the middle that are always stationary. And then, so the number 4 card, there are 4 4s in the game. So if you're able to get 2 on your side and they're only able to get 1 on theirs, well, then at the end of that round, you've now gained the favor of that geisha. It's one that's pretty interesting. It can be a quick game or it can be a long one. It's one that one day we should try out. The art's amazing. Hanamikoji.
Dude. Yeah. I'm in. So Japanese, I hear geisha, so I immediately go to like a Japanese theme, which very invested in, here for,
like there's the box art. You can see the box art on it is pretty cool for those who are watching on YouTube, if you can see it. And then the back, there's a little cards in the middle and you're playing cards to either side. And the art for all the cards are that way as well. And because I backed it I didn't back it, but I bought it right from the manufacturer. There's also I have a second set of cards, which are like modern looking geishas. It's pretty cool. Anyway, Hanamikoji.
Dude, great choice. That sounds fascinating. My next 2 are, my 6 and my 5 are 2-player games. I've gone 2 and then 2 and then 2 and then I split and then, it's a ton. So, my number 6 is Splendor Duel, which I got to play for the first time, against Jason on Sunday, a couple days ago. And here are, Jason gave the overall view, so I'll kind of say why I enjoy it over Splendor, because Splendor, I will say, is a game that at 2 players feels incredibly unbalanced. And I think we mentioned this when we did our review of Splendor, is that I felt like when Lindsay went first, I was just behind. Like I was behind the ball. And even the guy mentioned when y'all talked about it, like we talked about Splendor afterwards, whoever goes first just seemed to win, which is like definitely a different vibe. So a couple of things that I really like about Splendor Duel in comparison to Splendor, and I can see in multiplayer counts why I would want to play Splendor still. But I enjoy the faceted ways to win. Like it definitely opens up some more cool opportunities. The gem drafting, the only real limitations that I feel in gem drafting in Splendor is the raw number that I can have in my hand, or there's just literally no blues left, so I cannot draft like sapphires. Ugh. And this one, because it's random and how the gems get put out, you could very much be in a world that you're like, I need 2 black gems. Like I need them. But how that got spread out on the table is just not optimal. But there is an optimal play to grab these 3 gems that pay for a black gem over like on the board that I will have permanently. So if I don't think Jason's going to go that route, and I felt like this is something that, I mean, Jason and I spent a lot of time. I feel like we spent more time, I feel like, discussing Splendor strategy than we did actually playing Splendor Duel. But like reserving the cards is something that neither of us really do heavily in Splendor. However, in Splendor Duel, it felt very much like something that we wanted to do to kind of, I can see that he's drafted those gems. He's going for that card. All right, I'm going to sneak in and grab that. Another really cool feature of Splendor Duel is that lots of the gems have these purple icons, and there's 5 of them that do different things. One of them lets you have a free turn. One of them gives you that parchment or that favor scroll? Parchment scroll?
Favor?
Favor? There's some scrolls. There's 3 of them, and if you get them, you get 3 things. Privilege. There it is. Bang. Yeah. So you get that. You get a free gem of that color from the board. Like there's a bunch of them. And I told Jason, like we were probably 5 or 6 turns in, and I was like, oh no, I need to pay way more. I'm just doing like regular Splendor. I need to pay way more attention to these purple things. And unfortunately for Jason, the one that seemed to be popping up most conveniently is one of them. You get to take a gem from your opponent. The nice thing, and this will come up on my number 4, I feel like the nice thing about 2-player games specifically is that like you can't really feel targeting because there's no one else to target. So a lot of the quote, take that mechanics don't like, it's not if Jason, Elizabeth, and I are playing a game and Elizabeth and I both hit Jason in the same turn or same round, that feels awful for that player.
Yep.
But in a 2-player game, it's like, okay, that gem makes sense for me to have and I can combo it. I can't steal from anyone else. Sadly, Jason, I got to steal from you. So it ended up being a really fun time. It's definitely one that we're going to get for around the house because Lindsay really likes Splendor. I think I'm going to end up checking it out from the library first just to make sure that Lindsay's like, hey, because I'm trying to prep the quiver for the hospital.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be one of the ones that makes the quiver. So super, super cool. My number 6 is come in at Claim, which Claim is another game that Jason and I played on a traveling trip for disc golf. And Claim is a trick-taking game. It is the idea is it's a 2-round trick-taking game where there is a host of villages or like different, like not villages, races,
factions,
tribes,
races.
Factions.
They're races. Yeah, they're races. I think they're considered races in the game.
Yeah. but it's like skeletons and goblins and like that kind of thing. And so these cards have abilities or effects. And so, as you are playing, or the first half of the game, the whole deck gets dealt out and you draft. I take this, you take that. Okay. Well, now I take this one, you take that one. And you kind of go back and forth drafting your deck. And then in the second round, you play with the deck you just drafted. So to go back to my number 10, you think about, like, a lot of people when they think trading card games, they think about constructed is the actual format, which is I'm going to build this deck and I'm going to show up with that fully constructed deck and we're going to play. But drafting is like a whole genre inside of trading card games where it's like, here's a pool of cards. We're going to draft and see who has the best deck. Claim takes that concept and speeds it up super fast. So you're like somewhat having the real crunchy side. You can think about, okay, well, Jason just drafted the big goblin. Okay, cool. He's got that. Or Jason has a lot of skeletons and skeletons are going to be big points for him. So I got to somehow rob those skeletons. Like I got to figure out how to stop that side of things. So you're kind of like slow playing your deck as you go through. Fascinating. It is from a trick taking aspect. Obviously, we are big fans of trick taking here on this podcast. So I really do enjoy the trick taking aspect of it. Claim, it scratched all the itches for me. Oh man, because a lot of trick taking requires 4 because you have to have a partner, like a spades or a rook or things like that. This was a really fun way to have trick taking in just a 2-player format. Number 5 is going to be Claim for me.
Yep. Great choice. Obviously, we like Claim a lot. That's another one I played with all my family members. Elizabeth and I played it a ton. There's even a Claim 2. I think you can mix and match the 2 games. There's actually multiple claims, but I think in general, at least among our viewers, Claim 1 and Claim 2 are popular. Fox and the Forest is another good 2-player trick-taking game. I know we haven't played that yet, right? No, we didn't. I had it out first play. We didn't. Okay. My number 5 is my first true IP-based game, intellectual property, Star Wars, the deck building game. Another 2-player game. Talked about it a couple of times because just as games we played lately. The gist of it is your traditional deck building games. You start with your own deck. You're playing cards to either attack each other. You're attacking each other's planets, your home bases. You have to go through 3 home bases, i.e. 3 planets, knock them out to win the game. The cool thing about Star Wars, the deck building game, aside from just if you're a Star Wars fan, has always awesome characters that you know and love, is that you can buy cards from the common row or you can attack cards in the common row. I think some other deck building games do that. It's just super cool. For me, it was the first game I'd played that way, and it just changes up the dynamic of deck building games. Whereas think about Clank, if I could actually go knock out a card you want to get in that row. So that's what it means if you're playing the Rebels, I can knock out a Rebel before you can even buy them. Super cool. I just love that mechanism. We know I love deck building games. Star Wars is a deck building game. If you're a Star Wars fan and like deck building, cannot emphasize that enough. You can find it on sale often for $20 to $25. Super fun game. They even have a expansion out that I think is a standalone expansion, but has more of the Clone Wars stuff in there, both movie and animated Clone Wars. You know I'm going to get that one for sure. Star Wars deck building game. Highly, highly recommend if you're a Star Wars fan. My number 4 is my one and only game that is technically a multiplayer game, more than 2 players. Another IP-based game, but every reviewer who I've seen says it's absolutely best at 2-player count because of the way the gameplay goes. And that game is Slay the Spire. IP-based game, for those who know, Slay the Spire is a deck building game it was an app first. It's just a deck building game where you're going through dungeons and killing monsters. Slay the Spire, I went all in for Ryder, my board gaming, hardcore board gaming son, prodigy. It came out on Kickstarter a couple years ago. I knew he liked Slay the Spire, so we went all in. Like we have multiple versions of the cards. It has alternate art and then beta art for the games, and so he's mixed those in. It came with sleeves. The only game I own, not including the crew, which we bought sleeves for our game because we were going through it so fast. The only game I own that I have sleeved cards in is Slay the Spire because we went all in on it just to get this. It came with the sleeves as well. It's the same if you know the video games, the same idea. You are playing cards to go up a track and you fight demons along the way, and you have one big baddie you have to fight in the game. deck building game. You start with your own deck. You're buying more cards as you go. It's a very, very hard game. It's a co-op game. Also, it's the only co-op game on here. It's a 2-player co-op game. I didn't highlight that, but it's the only co-op game, and it's hard. Like Ryder and I eventually beat it, but we lost many, many times. But it was just fun because you're playing a card, and that monsters are hacking you, and it's really cool. It's pretty heavy. Quite possibly the heaviest game because there's so many things that happen during the game. There's so many abilities on the cards that can happen. There's so many things the monsters can do, and you got to kind of understand, okay, well, this monster, if you attack it, it does this, and it does that, and does this. Not hard. There's just so many little things that I basically like, all right, Ryder, you're going to run this game for us. I usually run games, but Ryder had already run it. He's played it multiple times solo. If you like the IP, like deck building, and don't mind a heavier game, because this is definitely a heavy game, Slay the Spire is amazing. Like it is absolutely amazing.
Dude. Yeah, I am definitely intrigued. But the best of two, definitely I could see that. But I remember even because y'all, how long have you had Slay the Spire?
We've had it, I think, since we moved here. I think it got delivered right after we got here, or something. I think it got delivered after we got here. The actual when the Kickstarter was fulfilled.
Okay. Yeah, because I was like, I feel like you played it within the last year. Like y'all played it. You've played it since we've been talking board games. I feel like because I remember y'all saying y'all went through it and were playing it.
Yeah, well, I guess it's just this year, so it must have gotten delivered early spring. So yeah, we played it. It was all of our plays have been this year.
Okay, yeah. So I really thought for a second, Jason, that we were about to have the exact same number 4.
True crossover.
I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Because you were like, this is my one game that every reviewer has said plays better here, all that. Because my number 4 is also an IP-based game, but it is not Slay the Spire.
Okay.
It is Disney Villainous.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm about to sell you on Disney Villainous. Jason collects Disney Villainous, and I'm about to show why I'm going to talk about this game. This game it's up there for me in like favorites. I love this game so much. It is one of the only games that I will play solo, and I play it solo basically against myself. So, let me tell you, Disney Villainous is where you play the Disney villains. They all have their own special board with 2 special decks. I'm not talking about the Star Wars or the Marvel versions, which have a shared fate deck, which is usually the good guys because you're playing the villains. But in Disney Villainous, in the Disney version, the fate decks are these like heroes. So if you're playing Captain Hook, the fate deck includes Peter Pan, Wendy, John, the Lost Boys, Tinkerbell, all cards that come to stop the villain from completing their quest or their goal. The replayability is insanely high. The collectability insanely high. Ravensburger is the one who makes Disney Villainous. They're also the same ones that make Disney Lorcana. They have access to the Disney IPs. It's fantastic. Now, here's why it's best of 2. Are you ready for my evangelization mission of getting more people to play? I don't think you are, Jason. So, what makes Disney Villainous rough? There are, in my opinion, 3 things. The first thing that makes it rough is the length of the game. Disney Villainous takes so long if you play with a full board of 6 players. We're talking like 2 hours easy, and it is not that hard of a game.
Yeah.
2 hours easy. Number 2, nothing feels worse than when everyone targets you and you keep getting faded over and over and over again. I'm making progress. Now I get faded. Boom. I've fallen backwards. And now it's going to take me 5 turns to rebuild to get back to where I was. And in a 6-player game, that means I'm not seeing the board for like 20 minutes. That stinks. It is not a fun experience. And then number 3 is the idea of king making, which is not a concept that I know that I don't think we've ever talked like specifically about king making as a term
right
on our podcast. King making is this idea of everyone's going to use their resources to basically either stop someone from winning, but when they do that, they're inherently choosing, I'm going to stop you from winning, which allows that person to win. I am pushing this person towards the title.
Yep.
Most often, it's not I'm going to do king making in terms of I'm going to give you my resources to make you win. It is king making in that I am destroying everyone else, and thus I will have no resources left to stop you from winning.
Yeah.
King making is a serious problem in a lot of games. A lot of the lighter board games have king making mechanism or a king making issue. I think of like Unstable Unicorns is one of the ones that comes to mind, where you can stop other people from getting to their 7th unicorn. Okay, tough. King making exists. This is 1000% true in Villainous, because it's like, oh, Jason's going to win next turn. Everybody fate Jason. So everyone fates Jason. Well, now Jason is left on a decision of his turn of Jason either has to stop Elizabeth because now she's going to win on the next turn because everyone after Elizabeth all stopped Jason.
Yeah.
Now Elizabeth just wins.
Yeah.
Frustrating experience. Terrible way to end 2 hours. Are you ready for why 2 players best? Here we go. 1, it's shorter. So it plays so much faster. 2, just like we talked about in Splinter Duel, I have to go to this space because it's best and it has a fate option on it. I'm not inherently trying to just stop you from succeeding at your side of the board. I'm also doing the other 3 actions that are on my board that are on that fate space. So I'm progressing my goal while also slightly offsetting yours. So that seems pretty good. And then 3rd, I can't do king making because I either have to decide, do I want to try to slow you down this turn or do I want to try to do my thing? And you can end up in this really cool race. It plays so good at 3 or at 2. Every time I go from 2, I'm like, oh, this is why everyone hates this game. So like it plays so well at 2. Yeah. Before I even jump to my number 3, how do you feel about that, Jason? Because I know there's strong feelings about Villainous.
I respect the argument, the strong justifications you gave for that. And it doesn't change me. It doesn't change my opinion at all. Because never say never. But with my pantheon of games I can play, I've used Pantheon like 4 times this episode. I won't go to Villainous. I love the art. The characters are fun. It's the same thing I say to every time. It's like, it just should be a better game than it is. With the art, the production's amazing, the pieces, everything about it. The game should just be better. It's clearly doing just fine because they keep releasing new ones. Like I don't have King Candy from Wreck-It Ralph is one of the newest ones. I think I may be missing one of the Marvel expansions. I can't remember. But I even have Oogie Boogie, which is a standalone single thing, just a single expansion. I think King Candy may be the same. But I can respect it. And if you like Villainous, that's your game. We played it at the beginning and just realized it just takes so long because it takes so long to get through those actions. If they ever can figure out a way to speed up the game, for sure. Great argument, great justification, and great choice.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's definitely one that, like, when we thought of this list, I was like, it's in my top 5. I know, like, it was one of the first 5 to hit the list. Honestly, it was like number 3. I had 3 of these nailed right off the bat. But my number 3 comes in, and it might be the best shot I have at a game on my list that, Jason, you might not have heard or played.
Okay.
So I might be proud of this one. Have you ever heard of or played the game Spirits of the Wild?
I've heard of it and I've seen it, but I've never played it.
Okay. I figured because it was another one that I thought was like sneaky, just like Lost Cities. And then I realized, oh, of course, people have heard of this game.
Yeah.
But Spirits of the Wild, very, very simple in how it's played. It is a drafting, push your luck, hand management game. So the board is presented in front of you, and you have this board where you collect gems onto your board. So these gems get brought out, and on the gems, they're like different colors. I think there's 6 different colors or something. And on your board, you have multiple ways to score. So like there are a bunch of animals that are presented on your board. So it'll be like turtle, For every single color you collect and put in the turtle spot, you get more points, and it increases exponentially. One of them you collect, it's like owl. You collect same color pairs going across. So how you collect these is that there is a bag full of gems that are different colors, and you're drawing gems out of the bag and placing them in a bowl. The bowl is a shared community bowl for the two of you. It is a 2-player specific game. And then you have 7 cards in your hand. 2 of them draw 1 gem. One of them draws 2 gems. One of them draws gems out of the bag. 2 take 1 gem. 1 takes 2 gems. Some draw gems out of the bag. And then there's a fox mechanic that gets moved around the board to where you can halt players from putting gems on their board, on that specific spot on their board. So the push your luck aspect is that there's 5 spirit gems that are, when you place them on a like animal, it doubles the points of that animal, but you can no longer put gems there. So it like stops that animal from gaining any more points.
Yeah.
When 5 get drawn, the 5th one gets pulled out of the bag. If as soon at the end of that player's turn, when it gets pulled out of the bag, that's GG. Game ends immediately.
Interesting.
It's not an equal balance of turns. So that's the push your luck aspect, is you're like, okay, I'm gonna wait, because there could be a turn where you play a card that draws 3 gems out of the bag. I could draw 3 spirit gems out of the bag, and it's like, that's the game. Okay, it's over. Spirits of the Wild, really, really fun. There are like these animal spirit cards. It's very, very simple, very, very simplistic. The production isn't even that incredible. It's probably like a $20 game.
Yeah.
Lindsay and I love this game. And we are always shocked when people are like, oh, I've never heard of it. It's so good. So good.
Yeah, I remembered it, and I looked it up to make sure, because I remember it had like a blue cover that had the fox or wolf or something on the front. That's what I knew about the game. And I'm sure I've heard reviewers talk about it. But the way you describe it, I had to pull it up and look at a Board Game Geek while you were talking. I'm like, okay, this is a game I could see that if we had found this 15 years ago, like absolutely be a favorite of ours, just because it just looks fun for sure. And I put a little push of luck, like you said. Yeah. Never played it. I had to play it at some point, but I could see that. And I know that I've heard some reviewers even have that on their top 100, because I remember seeing, they'll say it's a game that gets no love, but that's just one of their favorite games at the time. Good choices.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. My number 3 game, I don't think I've ever talked about it. I think we've played it. Me and Elizabeth have played it since you and I have been doing the podcast, or at least since you and I have known each other. But mine is actually a Button Shy game. Button Shy is the publisher, and Button Shy's thing is that they publish card games that are 18 cards. It's in a little wallet. I don't have any of them down here. But all of their games are 18 cards or less. You could buy expansions or something for it, but the standard is just 18 cards, and that's your entire game. And I have a whole series of the Button Shy games. I've bought and sold a ton. But the one that I'm going to mention today is called Circle the Wagons. Circle the Wagons is, excuse me, the last time we played it was last February. So no, I know we haven't played it since we've been talking on the podcast. Circle the Wagons is what's the best way to play this? It's hard to say. It's not a hand management game. It's a tableau building game. You are essentially, there's cards that are laid out, and the cards have 4 quadrants. It's a standard playing card size. When we say card games, it's a standard playing card size card, and it has 4 quadrants on it. And those quadrants could be different colors of 5 different like regions, like desert or forest or water or snow, and also could have images on there. And they're laid out in a circle. I think 15 of them are laid out in a circle. And then on the backs of every one of those are goals for the game. So then you turn over 3 of those for 3 different goals. So that's why it's infinitely replayable, because there's so many different goals you could have. And one player starts drafting, and if you go from a starting point, sort of like patchwork, in that, okay, you always start here, you draft a card, and then you play your card. The next player chooses a card to draft. They can draft the very next card or draft cards down the row. But every card they skip, their opponent gets to put in their tableau. Very interesting push your luck kind of thinking about that. It's not, I know me describing it doesn't make as much sense, but you're basically drafting cards from a board. and you're laying these cards on top of each other to maybe get a bunch of gray together, or maybe get a bunch of red together, or maybe getting bottles touching guns that are inside there. Quick game, because you're the whole game now you can play in rounds if you want to. You can play just one round of it, but you're drafting 15 cards and that's it. And then round 2, you're drafting 15 cards and that's it. Circle the Wagons. Most people won't even talk about this game. Super light. It's like $12 plus shipping from buttonshygames.com or something like that. They actually just did a Kickstarter reprint, whereas I already had the main game, a couple of expansions, and the solo game, or a couple of solo versions, and they just threw some more out there. I like Button Shy Guys a lot, so I support them. So I actually backed their latest Kickstarter, which wasn't even a true Kickstarter. It's really just a pre-order more than anything else. You just get a discount. So if you want a fun little light, inexpensive game, like I said, I think it's $12 plus shipping. Circle the Wagons is my number 3 game. And haven't played it since last spring, but we played it a lot. We've owned it for a while and have played it a good bit because the game goes so fast. Elizabeth doesn't like it because I don't know if she's ever won the game. And so she complains about it because she's like, well, I'm just going to draft the very next game, the very next card. Well, sometimes you need, because she doesn't ever want to give me a free card. Because if you don't draft the next one, the other person gets that one for free. I'm like, okay. But, and then they get to go again. So if you skip a card, now I get to play my card, you're going to go, and now I'm going to get another card. Right. And so, it's pretty fun. Circle the Wagons, my number 3. All right. So my number 2, I went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth on both of these. I actually talked about both of them multiple times in the history of this podcast. My number 2 fell to number 2 because the enjoyment from the gameplay is definitely number 2, not number 1. But the amount of times we played this game is, I couldn't even count it because we've owned it since the kids were young. Since Germany or before Germany, we've owned this game. It's a crossover. It is Lost Cities from the good Dr. Reiner Knizia. I love Lost Cities. Elizabeth and I have played it so many times. And so I mean, I think I may have shown you. If I pull it out and show you, like, the cards are they're not sleeved because, they're big cards, and we've handled them so many times that they are just rough looking for sure. Newer versions of Lost Cities actually have a 6th color because my standard one has 5 colors in it. The 6th color doesn't change the gameplay other than just add another color to the game and obviously more cards. It's a little funky at first to figure out the scoring because the scoring doesn't make a lot of sense because, like Robbie said, as soon as you put a card out, it's in the negative. But if you have the multipliers, it goes into more negatives. But once you understand the scoring intrinsically, like it's like a game like Rook or Spades or anything else, and that you can just kind of play it. After you play it more, you're like, okay, I know my strategy. I'm going to push my luck here, or I'm going to hang out and go ahead and throw a 2 down without throwing a multiplier down, see if I get more, or I got a 10. So I know I'm trying to go that, but I got to get a lower color for that. I played a ton on Board Game Arena. Board Game Arena, the game can take a little longer just because there's 3 rounds of it and you're going through a bunch of cards, even real time because people play a little slow. Lost Cities is an all-time classic for a reason. Love Lost Cities. We thought about buying the newer version just to have a newer game, but the one I have works just fine. We've given that game out as like gifts to people many times. Like I gave it for Connor's birthday, coworker Connor, for those who know Foundation. I gave that game Lost Cities to Connor a couple years ago for his birthday. I don't know if you ever played it, but Lost Cities is an awesome game.
Lost Cities feels like the game that I think I remember one night where I was up there for a February trip and I came home and it was like, oh man, long day. Elizabeth, we got to jam a game. And y'all just like slammed out Lost Cities because you've both played it so many times that it's like, you don't have to go over the rules. You don't have to go over the setup. Like you just know it, which is nice having games that feel that way.
For sure.
That is, in fact, how Lindsay and I feel with our number 2, which is Call to Adventure. Call to Adventure is a game set in the RPG universe where you are gathering. I think Call to Adventure will definitely be a game that we cover one day as an episode because it's just so fun on so many levels. I don't think we've done it as an episode yet.
No, we played it and have talked about a game we played lately, but we didn't do it as an episode.
Yeah. So Call to Adventure has a couple of features of it are there's a instead of a standard dice roll, you're casting runes, which are these like shark tooth shaped things that have marks on both sides. But instead of the randomness, I know when we introduced Ryan and Abby to this, Ryan really liked the fact that you can influence the die based on how you gather and stack your like traits as you go through. So you're doing these different challenges, casting runes and building a story because you have an origin, you have a motive, and you have a destiny that you go through as a board. There's 3 different phases. It gets more challenging as you go. Call to Adventure. I'm not going to spoil it too much because I know that we'll have an episode on it in the future. But if you look up plays on it, it is definitely one that our first one, we really don't have. My number one, Lindsay and I do not have to think about it in the slightest. Like, it is undoubtedly the most played game we've had in our relationship. We built a gaming table, and on the gaming table, we have a winner's wall. If you win a game on our game table, you get to sign on the winner's wall. Every win you get after that is an X. Call to Adventure is up there for us, though. In fact, for my birthday this year, my wife got me an expansion to Call to Adventure, which just adds more cards, other mechanics, things like that. It is one of the games, you love a game when you're like, let me get the expansions for it, and you actually use them instead of like, I think about like Quacks. We have the expansions for it, but we really just use the expansion of Quacks to get to 5 players. Like that is the biggest use. We're not using the alchemists and the witches. All right, we're using some of the witches, but like it's very interesting. So Call to Adventure, if you have an RPG background at all, if you do D&D at all, it really hits well with those crowds. The art's beautiful, very like Dixit-esque in that lots of the cards could just be posters that you would have around your house if you have fantasy decor. But my number one, Jason probably could have pegged it from the get-go. My number one is Smash Up. It's an all-time favorite for me in board games in general. So much replayability, and very similar to one of the big drawbacks of Smash Up is that at a full player count, if you have 4 people, a base can be laid down. In Smash Up, you have different factions. You're taking 2 different factions. You're smashing them together for a 40-card deck. You're playing characters and actions in order to increase power levels, and you're putting them on bases where they don't really fight. It's just power levels increase on that base. When power level hits a certain threshold, the base breaks, and victory points are awarded based on who has the most power at the base. The frustrating part in a 4-player game is that there are power combos so that a base could get played and you never get the chance to interact with it if you don't have special actions. And there are so many factions that just don't have special actions. So it's really, really tough to like lean into that. If you have a full player count. At 2 players, you can kind of see the ebbs and flows. At 2 players, you also can really test out a lot of the faction combinations. Lindsay and I have probably 10 or 15 different expansions for this game, and they all have 4 factions apiece. We have so many factions available to us that in the actual game rules, it says that you should snake draft. We do not snake draft. We literally just, we do a random draft because we've played it so many times that it's more fun for us to see the different combinations that we could get versus, oh, let's just play the OP ones over and over and over again. Right. Love Smash Up to death. It is, it's just going to be, it's an all-timer for me. And if you love any card games whatsoever with your significant other, with the person that you play games with the most, Smash Up for us is a must add to the collection because it always hits. Yep. It was the first game that we played on our game table.
That's very cool. To be the first game on the game table is a fun little history there for sure, and definitely an emotional connection. And you love the game still. It's one, we covered it. It's my favorite thing people hear me say. I understand why people like that. I understand people like Lorcana, D&D, and if people want to play Smash Up, I'll happily do it. But I won't ever buy any of the decks to go through those kind of things. But I always have, knowing that I have Robbie to play Smash Up if I want to, it's good. But it could be like you guys have played so many games of it, almost like a lifestyle game. That's just y'all's go-to game. Lost Cities was that for ours for so many times, for so many games, for so many years when the kids were young in Germany. That was our go-to game. My number one game, though, we didn't track the plays, so they'd probably be pretty close, but I kid you not, between Lost Cities and this, I could easily say we probably have hundreds of plays of these games. I know that sounds maybe 100 and something, maybe not hundreds, but over 100 games. Because Lost Cities, sometimes Lost Cities can go pretty fast, and we'd play 3 or 4 times in a setting while the kids are at the playground. So we easily have over 100 plays of Lost Cities. My number one game, for as much hate as we give the main game that this is based on, the Catan card game slaps. It drips. It's got all the cool words you want to say against it. The Catan card game is amazing. Loosely based. Wow. Yeah, I know. I've talked about the Catan card game before on the podcast as a game I played lately or something about it. But as much as we may hate on Settlers, if you even go look at the description for the Catan card game, it even says loosely based on the game. Because the main thing that it's based on is that on your turn, you roll a die that's going to give you, a number that's going to give you both start with 6 resources numbered 1 through 6, the 5 base resources of the game, and gold. And if that die gets rolled, you get one of those resources. The most you can ever have of those resources, there's 3, because you're basically turning cards to show how many resources you have. In the end, what's really fun about the Catan card game is you have these massive decks of cards you're purchasing or getting during the game and playing cards to do stuff to build a cool tableau. It's very similar for those who know Cities and Knights, the expansion. It's almost like Cities and Knights 2-player version of Settlers, because it's not really Settlers 2-player. The Catan card game takes in a lot of the good things of Cities and Knights, because at the heart of it is you're playing knights and you're playing these unique cities out into your tableau, and you are building roads, but the roads let you build another settlement, which lets you put more other cards out. Cards that do fun stuff, cards that do cool stuff. It's the game that famously, and Liz has probably talked to you about it, but there was a stretch where she kept track of how many games I won in a row. And I'm not kidding when I think the games was like 30 or 40 games in a row I won. I think it was that high, because she got so mad and she's tossed cards my way so many times because I'm like, and that's 12, and that's 12. And I just won the game, whatever, right? The Catan card game, and it's a funny thing. It's very ironic that I will not play Settlers unless people really want to, though I understand people have that as their lifestyle game, even though there's a whole world of gaming that's better than Settlers. But the Catan card game, we have played so many times. Like it's hard to tell. Now, this game came out also in 1996 or 1999 or something like that. Our box is just worn out because we've played it so many times. They actually released a sequel to it called The Rivals for Catan in 2010. I had to go look it up. It's a very similar version, but it's actually a more streamlined version, because there were some rules in the original one that you couldn't start playing action cards, which lets you take stuff from other people or attack people or steal stuff until you had 7 points on the board. The game was going to go to 10 or 12 points. Well, in the Rivals for Catan, if I remember correctly, you don't have that restriction. So it's almost like a more streamlined version. We still default to the original one for some reason. I don't really know. Maybe we should go to the Rivals for Catan. But if you can find the Catan card game, I think it's still in production, because it's like Catan in that, yeah, you're getting resources, but it's just not the same. You're not hoping it's number 1 through 6 are going to get rolled, because you always can trade 3 for 1 resource. So yes, sometimes you may be tight on resources, but then you can play these other units that now, okay, you can always trade 2 wood for anything. You can put out a one that doubles both sides. Like you could put it between this card that's pointing 2 ways that points at 2 different resources that doubles those resources. You have a second card, you have a second die, you roll 2 die, 1 die that's numbered 1 through 6 to get your resources. The other die, it's called the production die. It has 6 different things. Sometimes it's, hey, everybody get a free resource. Sometimes it's whoever has the highest knight strength gets a free resource. It's amazing. If you haven't played a Catan card game, you and I need to play that at some point, because it'll change it doesn't change my mind about Settlers by any stretch of the imagination. But it's easily my number 1 2-player game of all time.
Dude, I thank you for making the capture or the title of this video so incredible.
Okay.
You'll never believe Jason's number one.
You won't.
Top 10 2-player games. That's immaculate. I will be honest. I have not played the card game.
Yep.
So we'll have to play it next time I'm up.
For sure.
Maybe like we got done in the afternoon. We're waiting. We decided not to do a nap afternoon, and we went for Catan, the card game. Jason, I think we put together a good little list here.
Yep.
I think definitely some options for people to consider and look at if you're in the market for some 2-player games.
I totally agree. What's funny is, I won't go through them all, but I'm going to highlight a couple. I have 10 games in my honorable mention that are 2-player only games. So I'll highlight one. One's called Dice Throne. You and I've never played it. There's a whole version of Dice Throne where it's basically true battle Yahtzee, in that you have cards in front of you that you roll Yahtzee style. The final result of those dials lets you do things to get more cards, possibly to upgrade your ability or attack your opponent. Dice Throne is an elimination game. You're trying to eliminate your opponent, so it's a pure dueling game, but it is the truest version. I mean, it's almost like take King of Tokyo but make it a 2-player game in a way. Though they just released a King of Tokyo duel. I've seen some reviews come out of it, but there's a 2-player version of King of Tokyo that just got released. That's a side note. The other one I will mention is actually, there's so many good games. The other one I'll mention, which is very interesting, called Chronicles of Crime. It's a multiplayer game in that you are using an app to scan QR codes on characters to solve a crime. So you have to have the app, the Chronicles of Crime app, which has a scenario, and then you basically go to a character or go to a place and scan it, and it gives you information. And then you go to a character, and as you scan them, they're basically answering questions you're giving them. And then it has an AR perspective where you go in a room and you turn the iPad around. You can use it on a phone as well. And you're looking at items in the room. Oh, I see a knife. I see a bottle. I see a cup. And you have a separate set of cards in which you now pull those out and can start scanning them as well. It's a little clunky because you're having to use a device. Super cool game if you like, solving murder mysteries in a board game. Chronicles of Crime takes a while. Like it's a multiplayer game, but the tough thing about being more than 2 people is that only one person can really look at the iPad at a single time. So you're like, okay, I'm just going to sit here while you're looking at that, or I'm going to sit here while it's this. We've discovered that we like that better at 2 players.
Yeah, honorable mentions. I would say my 3 honorable mentions, 2 of them I mentioned in the polyomino world. One of them is cartographers jumped up there for me.
Yeah.
I know we play cartographers. Just very fascinating, the multi-phase aspect of you're still doing polyomino, but you're also trying to do some scoring goals and objectives is really cool.
Right.
So I like cartographers a lot. It's also it's not really a roll and write as much as you're drawing and all that, which is really fun. So I enjoyed that game a lot. Blocus, however you want to describe it, is one of our most played polyominoes of all time. It plays really fun at 2 because at 4 it really shines because of the fact that everyone's playing. I think one of the biggest reasons it didn't make this list is because at 4, everybody plays their own color. At 2, you both play 2 colors. So you have to really be crunching it. And most of the time at 2, you end up cannibalizing one of your colors to let the other one shine. And it just comes down to a matter of who was the least cannibalistic. Because both of you end up usually getting one color pretty low. So that, and then, truly up there is 5 Tribes. Man.
That was the game I took off the list that I love it at 2 because you're controlling two pawns on there, right? You're not controlling different characters. Your character has 2 pieces to move as opposed to just moving 1 around the board. And I love it. And there's so much strategy in 5 Tribes. We'll eventually cover it. And when we cover it, we'll have to talk about the slight difference between 2 players and multiplayer. But love 5 Tribes. It was on there and I kicked it out because there's no single version I like more than any other as long as I'm not playing with solo players. Castles of Burgundy was another one that I played a ton at 2-player on BGA. And I just really love the game. It plays pretty much the same at 2, 3, or 4. You just have a little more options at those things. And I love it so much.
Yeah.
I think it's good, man. I think our lists are both good. We have a good variety between the two of us, unsurprisingly, because we have similar playing styles and a little bit varied playing styles. We had, 2 crossovers? Yeah, Lost Cities was a crossover, and Splinter Duel was a crossover. Claim could have made my list easily. It was in my honorable mention for sure. Lorcana, I totally understand. TCGs, CCGs, LCGs totally makes sense. That's a great one. And people I've seen when they do that, they'll often say they'll use Magic, but it's same. And then maybe lose Lorcana now, but Magic same, right? It represents that entire world of 2-player dueling games. Cool. Yeah. It's a good variety of games for people to hear about.
Yeah. So if you enjoyed, obviously we appreciate the support in all of the podcasting ways. You know how to do it. Leaving reviews helps a lot. Leaving likes and subscribes on our YouTube channel helps a lot. I would definitely say we have some ideas going, and I'll go ahead and say that at the latest in 2025, we'll start posting some extra videos and content. I've got now like a new little an easier way to record things, not necessarily in a board setup, but because of playing Lorcana a lot more in digital spaces, I feel like I can have my like board game pieces in front of me. So it's going to be very easy for me to also jump in doing some pieces of extra content for y'all. So if you've not checked us out on YouTube, be sure to head over there and check out our YouTube channel, Bards of the Board. And we will catch you guys for episode 31 in a couple weeks.